Okay, so we have our base and our two sides right here. The next step is to run these through the jointer. So let's get that started. So before we run these through, I'm going to start by selecting which edge to joint. And that's going to be largely dependent on any bow in the board. If there is a bow like this, you'd want to flip it over so that the two edges are touching. In that way, you're going to get positive registration on the beds. Doing it with if it's bowed and in the center, you could get rocking and tilting and take a while to get a good edge. So that's the primary consideration. Then take a look at the grain. In this case, it looks to be running kind of out this way. So as our knives come around, it's going to be going with the grain and minimize any tear up. So we're going to go ahead and run this one through like this, and then the other two will follow in the same manner. So we're going to use a jointer here to clean up one of the rough edges. That'll accomplish a couple of things. Number one, it'll make that edge flat. Number two, it'll make it perpendicular 90 degrees to the face, and we accomplish that by holding the face tight up against the vertical fence there, which has been preset to 90 degrees with the bed of the jointer, and make several passes until it's fully cleaned up. We'll do this to all three boards, and at that point we will have one side perpendicular to the two faces, and it will be flat and smooth. After this, we'll go over to the table saw to rip it to final width. Okay, now that we've got our edge jointed, we're going to go ahead and make the rip cuts on the table saw here. Okay, so we're going to start by cutting the bottom piece, and the bottom piece here's the rough edge. So this is the side that's going to ride against the fence, and our plans call for a dimension of the bottom of 7 3/8 inch. I'm going to go just a little bit wider than that, maybe just a 32nd beyond the measurement, because we will use hand planes to do the final dimensioning. You don't have to do that, but I do it to clean up any saw marks left on the piece. But we'll go ahead and make that cut. Okay, I do want to talk to you for a second about our side pieces. So we cut the bottom to near the final widths of 7 3/8 of an inch, and the sides, well, these sides are going to be held in place with dovetails and dowels to the bottom piece. So the other lateral side pieces are going to be dovetailed into these, and I don't know what those are going to be yet, probably somewhere around 5/16 of an inch. What we're going to do with these is go ahead and leave them long and then do final fitting to the bottom piece when we cut the dovetails. You'll see how that works. But for now, we're going to cut these at a safe, if that's 5/16, that's 3/8, 7 3/8. So we're going to go ahead and cut these to 8 inches, and we'll do 8 1/8. How's that? That should be good enough. So clear as mud, right? So I was basically making the decision that the side pieces are going to be 5/16 of an inch thick. Because of that, we have two side pieces, that's 10/16 or 5/8, added to 7 3/8, that's 8 inches. And I'm adding another 1/8 of an inch just to give us some wiggle room to play with for final sizing. No big deal. Okay, we're back here at the workbench, and we have our pieces cut to width. Now we're going to cut them to final length, and we're going to do that by looking at the plans, which call for 21 inches wide will be the full piece. So we're actually going to, when we set this in, we're going to cut a rabbet here along the bottom. so that you don't see any ugly gaps if you're looking in from the top. If we were to just use a butt joint, there's a chance we could see some gaps, although that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for this. But we're going to use maybe a 1/4 inch rabbet there into the end of the side pieces. And so we're going to want a total width of 21 inches minus a 1/4 on this side and a 1/4 on that side, so that's going to be 20.5. So we'll go ahead and get that marked. Actually, we're not going to mark it yet. Let me back up a second. We'll actually be cutting this. You could do it 2 ways. Well, you could do it multiple ways, but the 2 most obvious maybe to me would be either on the miter saw or the table saw. And my preference here is on the table saw using the crosscut sled. Just gets it closer to 90 degrees with the edge, and then we can come in with the shooting board to get it absolutely perfect, although you probably don't even need to do that. In fact, you definitely don't need to do that. But what we'll do is cut one edge and then measure our 20.5 inches and cut the other edge. And on the side pieces, these are going to be 13 inches high. So we'll do the very, very same thing, making these 13 inches. Okay. Crosscut sled out here, set on the table. Go get our pieces, get this guy out of the way here to start. So the first step here with the crosscut sled is to trim one end of the bottom board. That will square it up to the edge. Once that's trimmed, we can measure out our 20.5 inches and cut the bottom board to final width. The side pieces are handled in the same manner by trimming one end of the board to square it up with the edge, and then I'm actually setting up a stop block at 13 inches, and that way I can cut both boards against that block and make them equal. Okay, so now that we've got these pieces cross-cut to length, we're going to go ahead and finish the machining on the bottom piece and sort of set that one aside, and then get into cutting the design out of the side pieces for what we want that to look like, which I don't really know yet what I want that to look like. We'll just do a little bit of trial and error and see what looks good. So before we do that, I did sort of lay out which sides I want facing up, which sides I want facing out, and what we're going to go with here is this will be facing up on the bottom piece, and these will be the 2 sides. You know, from a grain matching perspective, they look pretty close. We can go ahead and mark that accordingly. Here, find my pen. So this is going to be facing up. I'll just mark that facing up. This is going to be the inside. Eye. There we go. Easy as that. Now we'll go ahead and get this bottom piece final dimensioned here. See if I can do it on the shooting board. So it may be too long. Yes, it is. It's actually too long for the shooting board. That's okay. All we want to do is take the saw marks, you know, off of the edge. So we'll just do it in the vise here. Okay. So open the vise up. Here. Just grab the 5.5. Just light passes until you get a full width shaving. And there we are. Do the other side. Looks like it's actually, well, it's a mix, so it's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. This blade's sharp, it's probably going to cut just fine. And then so we can really feel where the joint are. Okay, there we go. We have a full width shaving there. So we're done. I usually like to check if it's square. Just a little metal square here. So you can just sight down the board. Yeah. It's totally fine. So back over here at the shooting board, we'll go ahead and get the ends squared up. They will be mostly square just from the table saw crosscut sled is very accurate. However, we'll go ahead and get these. So what we want to do first is cut a little chamfer on the end so that we don't get blowout of the end grain there, and then shoot it. Okay, almost there. Okay, and the other side. Okay, and then we can check this also for square. Perfect. And also check the edge. No light, no light's coming through at all. So that's what we want. This piece is now finished. We will do some smoothing with the hand plane before final assembly. However, this is done. It's a reference piece at this point. So one thing I failed to do is mark the bottom of these. I did mark the inside. This is the inside. Let me see if I can remember. Okay, so that had that knot up there. Although that's, yeah, this is interesting figure down here. So I want to keep that, get rid of that. So this is going to be the bottom here. So this is the side that we want to shoot on the board. Sometimes it's hard to, you've got to reset and keep this flat up against, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and mark that bottom. And then our inside on this one here, I didn't like that, so we want to get rid of that. So we're gonna call this the bottom. Okay, mark it. So while we're cleaning up here, let's talk a little bit about the shooting board. The main purpose is to make the end square with one edge, something my crosscut sled already does a pretty good job of at the table saw. But if I'm using my miter saw to make these crosscuts, it's much less accurate, and I have a much more difficult time getting it set up to 90 degrees. That's where the shooting board comes in really handy. So if you have some hand tools, some hand planes, I highly recommend making one. There's several videos on YouTube that show how to make various iterations of this. Maybe I'll do one in the future. Who knows? All right. Now let's finish up the side pieces. The only real requirement that I have on these is that the vertical face is going to be about 5 inches. That'll extend. Our lateral sides are going to be 4 inches high, and then we'll take this up to 5, just so that we don't have an abrupt transition to deal with. So that is our only requirement. Then beyond that, we don't want to just leave these a box, right? That would be extremely ugly. Throw a handle through it. It's just clunky, way too much material. We can do better than that. So let's get the 5 inches marked out. Easiest way to do that is with the combination square. Set that at 5. Go ahead and throw a mark on here. 5 inches. Now the easy thing to do, which I like easy, would be, well, let's find the center point first off. Let's find the center point at the top of this board. So grab a tape measure. Forget what I said this is, 8 1/8 maybe. Yeah, just under 1/8, so we're gonna go 4 and just shy of a 1/16. That's going to be our center point on this board. Okay, 4 and just shy of a 1/16. Okay, so there are our 2 center points. Now you can just start to experiment. We'll just take this mark on this one. It has a little lighter wood, maybe easier to see. So we could just put some angles up here, and that would look totally fine. Just for the sake of argument, put a ruler out here. You could mark off, say, 1 inch on each side, 1 inch there, and this is totally just off the cuff. This is, I guess, where your artistic side can start to take hold, and just start experimenting and see what looks right. These marks will all come off the board either through sanding or planing. Okay, there's one, and mark this guy here. Lefty. Okay, there's 2, so I probably can't see this too well, but just 2 angles coming up the board. And that would be actually totally fine. It's linear, maybe a little bit clunky, but would it be interesting if we maybe did some sort of radius? So instead of just going straight, come down a little bit first, and then maybe come in from the side. Have these 2 lines meet somehow. Art is not my strong suit at all. But if we get to some point here where we can draw a curve, then what does that look like? Well, that's kind of neat, right? In fact, I kind of prefer that. You could go the other direction with it. You could go an outside curve up to the top, just like that. And how does that look? Well, that's a little obtuse for me. I prefer less material versus more. I'm kind of leaning towards this. Now, one interesting thing is maybe this could be somewhat asymmetric as well. We could do the curve on one side, leave this side straight, or just draw the other one in. Okay. How does that look? I actually think I prefer that. So we'll go ahead and go with that, and we can cut curves on the bandsaw. You can use a jigsaw. You could use a coping saw, whatever you have available. That will cut curves is what you should use. So we'll do it on the bandsaw. Okay, so before we cut the final shape out, I did want to show you this. I went ahead and just cut the angles on the table saw very quickly, just so you could see what that looked like. You know, it's going to go together like this. We'll have one more on the other side, and then the lateral side pieces coming across. And that would look pretty cool, and that's totally acceptable. That's actually a decent design. In this case, we're going to go ahead and experiment a little bit. Let's cut some arcs out and see what this starts shaping up like. Alright, we're going to make the cuts now at the bandsaw, and I've got a 3/4 inch resaw blade in here, so it's at about the limit of radius of curvature that it's able to cut, but we get the job done. So just staying a little bit, you know, away from the line here. We'll do final shaping as the next step. And here you can sort of see the asymmetric look, which is interesting, but we'll go ahead and cut the other side out. Same process, stay a little bit away from the line. Note that the blade guides are just slightly above the workpiece. I keep it as close as possible so that the blade is as stiff as possible through the cut. And there we go. Doing a little bit of cleanup here on the other side because, again, the wide blade made it difficult to get that tight radius. And same thing on the other side. And now we will clean up those cuts we just made using the front vise here on my workbench. Gets it locked in there nice and tight. And I'm going to be using a combination of a spoke shave and rasp to sort of file that edge down a little closer to the line. And then we'll do final shaping over at the oscillating spindle sander. But if you don't have a spoke shave and you're starting to get into hand tools, I highly recommend picking one up. Maybe as one of the initial purchases. They're not too expensive and they sure do come in handy for things like this, for general shaping tasks. You know, they can handle inner diameter curves like what we have here, and they're fairly intuitive to use. So just continuing to work the edge here, you see me looking at it because the blade is not protruding very far, and so you'll see in a minute here I'll make an adjustment so that it protrudes a little further and takes a little more material off with each stroke. So then we'll grab the rasp here and start working on that inside portion. The radius there is a little too tight for the spoke shave. And again, just taking it slow, continuing to check in reference to the line there to, get as close as possible and smooth off some of those cuts from the bandsaw. So now we'll go ahead and make that adjustment. Spoke shaves can be a little bit finicky to adjust. Some people use like paper to shim it or an aluminum can, but I'm just kind of doing it here in an approximate way. I just want that blade to stick out a little bit further so it'll take off more material. So that's what I did, and now we can go ahead and finish it up. And that should do it. Now we'll just put the other side in the vise and do the same exact thing. Okay, now with the spindle sander, we can just do some final shaping, make them look, somewhat consistent side to side. I like to do most of the shaping with hand tools rather than really trying to, dig in with a spindle sander. That's not a lot of fun. But we can do the final shaping here. So now we'll just do the final shaping here, get rid of those rasp marks, blend everything in, and just take it right down to the line. And a note on this rigid oscillating spindle sander, you'll see these if you watch other woodworking channels sort of all over the place, even in the higher end shops. They're extremely versatile. There's several spindle sizes that come with it and a belt sander attachment as well. And the price point, they're not expensive. So if you don't have one of these or you don't have a spindle sander or anything like that and you're looking to pick one up, I would highly recommend this one for the reasons I mentioned, the versatility and the cost effectiveness. All right, so now that we've got one side done, it's just a matter of marking transposing this to the other one and rinsing and repeating. So let's find our inside here, bottom here, to inside here, bottom here. Line them up as best as you can. You know, it can be just close. This isn't a science that we're doing here. And we'll just go ahead and mark them. 1, 2. So these are what I would consider non-critical dimensions. This is just more, they're not going to serve any purpose other than to look good. So, all right, now that we've got this side marked out, we can go ahead and make the cuts on the bandsaw. All right, so at this point, the process is the exact same that we just went through with the other side, so I'm not going to show you everything here. We will end it here at the bandsaw. So I think I said last episode we'd get into some of the joinery. We obviously did not do that. However, you kind of got to get this stuff done first. Make sure all the parts are flat and square and ready for the joinery if you want it to go together right. So it took a little bit of time to do that, but it will be well worth it in the final product when everything fits just right. So if you made it to the end of this video, please like, hit the thumbs up below, and even consider subscribing. Thanks.